Awesome. Thanks, Harpreet. Hopefully you can see my screen. I have a short primer to kick this off, and then, like the session says, ask me anything. We're good to go? Can you see my screen? Awesome. Okay, so my name is Ben Taylor. If yeah, so if you guys don't know me, I studied chemical engineering, worked at Intel, Micron, and Semiconductor. I worked at a hedge fund as a quant. I worked at HireVue, ran their data science team there, and I co-founded an AI company called Zeph.ai that was acquired a year and a half ago by Data Robot. So now I work on evangelism at Data Robot. And before I jump into AMA, I always share ski photos anytime I present. I took this a few months ago. For me, this is spiritual. It's definitely a key part of what drives my experiences. But also, I am a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I think this spirit of exploring or kind of pushing against the boundaries, there's something that's very exciting about that, not just with skiing, but also in data science and when we do AI research. One more thing about myself before I go through a few points. I am one of the co-hosts on the More Intelligent Tomorrow podcast. This is something that also shapes my experience because I have opportunities to listen to people like Chris Mattman, former Congressman Will Hurd, Chris Lynch, a variety of CEOs and CDOs. We had General Petraeus on, so definitely something to check out. This is not a corporate podcast, and what I mean by that is the only objective is to ask interesting, selfish questions to the hosts, and so we can find unique perspectives. So I've got a few things that I'm hoping will prime this discussion. Obviously, feel free to ask me anything, but I've been thinking a lot more about the AI pyramid. And what I mean by that is 10 years ago, we started at the top of the pyramid. So you've got elite AI researchers. So people that, study their PhDs, this is what they know. And as we gain momentum and stand on the shoulders of giants, and I think for most people listening who've been in the AI space, things are getting easier, right? So our ability to build models with AutoML, with MLOps, with all these tools that are being built out compared to 10 years ago, holy cow, is it easier? Like compared to like the pre-Docker days, the pre-Kubernetes days, like back when things were hard, it's much easier. And so we're marching down this pyramid where we're going from only the elite researchers could do any of this stuff to now junior talent. And we have examples where now developers are starting to be able to build AI models and do things. But there is a bottom to this pyramid, and I am the most excited about the bottom. So the bottom of the pyramid has my mom, my dad, my neighbors. It's everyone. And so what is a world where everyone would use AI? Well, just like we use phones and databases today, there will be smart homes, there'll be AI in the hospitals. Like everywhere we go, data will be analyzed in a way that benefits our lives. The other thing that's top of mind for me recently is I love data scientists. We kind of think of ourselves as being analytical thinkers. And I have a lot of fun working in marketing now where I am falling in love with the more artistic style of data science. So how can we become more innovative? How can we think outside the box? What could we possibly do? And one of the favorite questions I've had from an audience once was, I've kind of mentioned that we are now limited by our own creativity because AI can do some unbelievable things, and the doability and the how to build it is not the issue. It is what are you going to build? And so when I think of creativity, it's actually quite simple. And what I mean by that is you're going to work on a passion project. What are you going to work on? Let's assume your mind goes blank. It's a blank sheet of paper. So you see these two arrows, one pushing down, one pushing up. If I'm thinking of a project I want to work on, I think of, well, what do I selfishly want to do less of in my life, and what do I want to do more of? And you'll find that you will come up with some amazing ideas that fit well into that with AI. So I'll show you some of mine, and then we'll get to the AMA. So one of the projects I've been very excited about recently is building out an AI system that knows what I'm doing in my office. So this is an example of me working. And this type of pre-processing, it maintains spatial elements, but it encodes temporal elements into a frame. And so it's not just looking at a frame in time, it's understanding a temporal window. So this is me working, this is me doing sit-ups, this is me doing push-ups, and this is me doing pull-ups. And so with a system like this, that my office knows what I'm doing, and it knows whether or not I'm missing my fitness routines. And so if I am, the system is designed to play an embarrassing noise in the background of my Zoom calls, and for me, that's quite problematic. And so that's a very fun, selfish project. But you can see it's just what I want to do less of. Well, I want to what I want to do more of. I want to hit my fitness routines. I don't want to miss, because humans are, we're fickle. We make mistakes. It's hard for us to master routines. For me, selfishly, this is interesting. The other project, I don't have geek candy to show you yet, but the other project is building out an AI system to detect if my TV room is messy. And if the TV room is messy, I've got 3 young kids using computer vision, and that one is just doing frame analysis. The TV is disabled, so the TV is turned off. And for them, the Xbox, Roblox, Five Nights at Freddy's, that's a real consequence. But the thing I love about this is it short circuits the consequence. I'm not giving it. 2 more slides, then we'll go to AMA. When you're thinking of questions to ask, some questions I will have I will have an answer speaking from experience. Some questions I won't, and so I will try to call that out and admit when I probably am not the best resource to answer some of these questions. One of the things that's been pounded through my head is delivering value with AI, and hopefully you can get that from a sense of forced humility, where I've made so many mistakes when it comes to shipping value. And so any questions around applied value, innovation, I don't want to steer the questions, but I think I'll leave it at that. So Harpreet, so before I kick it off, I'll just leave this slide up. This is how you can get a hold of me. I've been using Volley lately, so if you do have a question, you can ask a video question later in the future. I won't answer it right away, but I might come back a few weeks later and answer it. And then Ben Taylor data. So let's open it up to AMA. I'd love to get some questions that were spicy, like, why hasn't your spouse left you, or something like that. Like, obviously we should have data science questions, but I think that'd be funny that if someone could really lean.
Ben, right on, man. Thanks for the wonderful intro and giving us a chance to see what it is that you're up to. Got a question here coming in from my friend Christoph here. Do you miss Harpreet's happy hours? You're actually there yesterday, man. We had a good time yesterday.
Yeah, honestly, sometimes Friday my brain is just mush.
Yeah.
Or I've been traveling. Like last week I was traveling. I was in DC, Dallas, and Tucson, just running. And so sometimes my brain is too mushy to be useful. But I do like to go when I'm not just at my wit's end.
Yeah, hey, for those of you guys that don't know, I do this weekly happy hour thing. Ben's a regular fixture there. He's always showing up. We're having a good time. You can register by going to bit.ly /ADSOH. They're a lot of fun. Also hosted live on LinkedIn. We're talking about something. You mentioned something in your presentation about creativity and the artistic side of data science. And I think we kind of touched, we were talking a little bit about this tangentially yesterday about creativity in data science. Or just creativity in science. Like, I mean, that to me, like, the lines get a little bit blurred sometimes when you're talking about these high level concepts. Sometimes physics and philosophy tend to blend together, and I think in a lot of ways, like art and science kind of start to blend together as well. So, like, is data science an art? Is it a science? How do we find the intersection of those?
I think all science is an art in a way, and so to kind of go through that through line is, where does creativity come from? Well, it comes from unique experiences. We are all unique, and that's why it's good to have diverse teams when you're doing research, because people are going to have different perspectives and goals. And so I think with any innovation, there is this kind of artistic chaos on what are you trying, how are you doing it. I think of the Pixar. I'm going to totally butcher the quote, but there's that the art drives the science and the science drives the art. That's not the exact quote, but you do see these worlds colliding, and that's the place that makes me the happiest. So if I can play where the artists meet the technologists, I'm having a lot of fun, because you get to work with people that are not data science experts. They're creatives, but they are really good at video, illustration, storytelling, and all the things that can make AI projects come to life.
And speaking of like the creative aspect of it, like the project that you showed off to us there, like that took some creativity to come up with that idea. So how did that happen? Like, how do you come up with an idea for a project, and what's it like when you're trying to execute on that?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because it's because some people see some of these projects. Some people do see them as being creative, and I think they're much more selfish than that. So I would argue, anyone listening, going back to that 2 arrow approach, what do you want to do less of, and what do you want to do more of? So if you looked at your life and you said, you know what, I hate meal planning. I don't want to plan meals. I just want AI to do it. I want a computer system to do it. people might say, "Oh, wow, that's really creative," but I kind of like that the seed was selfish. You're like, "No, I actually just want that for me." So for the projects I shared, there is a very selfish initialization. Like, this is selfishly interesting for me. Or um, the wonderful thing about AI is that the possibilities are infinite. Will we ever run out of AI healthcare use cases? Never. There's no scenario where you get bored with innovation in healthcare and AI. But you could use AI to detect drowning in a swimming pool. You could use, build out epic AI smart homes that are actually useful. I guess the last thought before I lose it is AI. If it's not actionable, it's it's terrible. Think of like the co-pilot on your shoulder. If I had a co-pilot that was blaring an alarm every 5 minutes, that was a false positive, that wasn't actionable. No one wants that. But if I have an AI assistant or a co-pilot in my life that is actionable, it's useful, that's great, right? That's what we all want, is this AI co-pilot to make us less distracted, more focused on what matters.
Guys, if you have a question for Ben, go ahead and drop them in the comments. We'll be getting to them. But yeah, I mean, because it's kind of impossible to predict the future growth of knowledge, I think. Yeah, that's just kind of the nature of knowledge. Knowledge creation is genuinely an act of creation, of creativity, of curiosity, and it's bringing something into existence that wasn't there before, right? That's the cool thing that we get to do with some of the stuff that we work on.
Yeah, and I had a reaction to what you just said. Something I want to define is I actually take issue with the idea of predicting the future, predicting what's coming,
Mm.
because I take a much more selfish approach where I just say, well, I know what I want to build, so I'll build it, and therefore I'm predicting it. But predicting it is not. Maybe I'll make the point a little bit more clear. So if I said I think this is where AI is going in the future, and I sit on my hands and don't do anything, and turns out I'm right, why would I be right? That means someone else built it, and I'm much more hands on. Does that make sense? So like, if you
Yeah.
say, I think AI is going here, I would rather just build what AI systems I imagine in the future, selfishly for me, for my family, and for the things that I think are useful. And it becomes this self fulfilling prophecy. So I, not that that's exactly what you're saying, but I think that's a funny emotional reaction that I have when people talk about predicting where the future is going with AI, where I get much more selfish.
Yeah. What's the is there blurred lines for you between selfishness and curiosity? Because I feel like they're kind of the way I hear you talking about it, it blend together a little bit.
Yeah, I think they do blend together. I maybe selfishness, it really brings uh, and and I've heard other people say this. So other people in the data science space, we had Hannah Fry on our podcast, and something she said that I really liked. She has some amazing projects, and I think we were just listening to Formula One. She's a very very big maths nerd in Formula One and other things, and she wrote this book on the mathematics of love. And so you read these use cases, and they're out there. They're totally different than what you've seen, which means they're interesting. The novelty's there. And I asked her, essentially, does she try to engineer or figure out what types of projects will resonate with an audience? And she pushed back and said, no, they're selfish. Like, these are genuinely interesting to her. And so, um, I guess you're talking about curiosity and selfishness being intertwined. I would really encourage people to lean more selfishly on the AI projects they do, because if you're trying to predict projects for other people, then the passion is not going to be there, the energy is not going to be there, the weekend work or the evening work is not going to be there. It's going to feel more. It's all about authenticity, right? So try to be totally 100% authentic with the passion and the projects you're working on.
I mean, that's great advice for even entrepreneurs, right? I mean, I think that's typically how businesses get started because first you want it, you need it, it solves your problem, you're selfish, and then the challenge
Well,
is scaling it.
well, and then to pull on that, taking it over into entrepreneurship is, so after doing a startup, because there's a lot of people, and I'm being critical of myself. So anytime I say something that sounds like I'm being a jerk, I'm being a jerk to myself. But maybe some people listening might take it this way. So if you're not quitting your job, you're a entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is a lot of people love the idea of doing an AI startup, and I like to teach. So I was a entrepreneur for many years. I'm doing a startup, I'm grinding, I got a project on the side. I still have my day job, and then you quit and you're an entrepreneur. And so when people are thinking about, do I have an AI startup, or do it doesn't have to be, do I've got a startup idea, I really want to do it, I want to pursue it. What do you think about my startup idea? And I like to say, you should never do a startup unless you are willing to fail completely, unless you are willing to take your credit to hell and run out of all your money and lose your home, list goes on, and be bankrupt, you should not do a startup. And what I'm trying to encourage people to do is find that passion, right? So if you have a passion, you say this is the most important thing that I could possibly be doing. That is fantastic. Go do a startup. Like, does that make sense? I see that
Yeah.
hesitation. I've got this good idea. I want to do this. I think this could be great. If you don't have that passion where you think this is the most important thing that the world needs, you haven't found the problem yet.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta be rationally optimistic, right? Not only in your thing that you're creating, but your ability to get that thing done. A lot of great questions coming into the chat here, so we'll get to them. Man, can you like hook me up with Hannah Fry? Because I'd love to get on. I've been trying to get her onto my podcast. I mean, Hannah Fry, if you're watching this, please, I need to get past your publicist. I'd love to have her on the show. Gonna have to have you swing me an introduction there because I'd love to get her on the artists of data science. All right, so questions coming in here. Where do you look for inspiration when you're feeling drained?
Oh, that's a tough one. There are some things that are really surprising. So my co-founder Gonzo and I, we were really big about our afternoon walks because sometimes if you grind away and you're doing a lot of work, you'll notice your cognitive abilities will be going down. Like the number of bugs you're introducing into your code are slowly going up. I've stared at a computer screen for 2 hours, just totally dumbfounded on how I can fix this impossible bug. I take a 15-minute nap or I go on a walk, come back, fix it in 5 minutes. And so definitely be conscious of your energy during the day. I'm a big fan of going on a run, going on a walk, having a conversation with someone over coffee, just changing the gears on the brain temporarily and then coming back to things can help. The picture I had of me skiing in the morning, I really like doing that stuff. It's probably not recommended because of the risk. Like the probability of me dying in an avalanche is a real probability. Like it could, I don't think it's single digits. Especially if you look at me over. I've been in a few avalanches. I've cracked my kneecap on an avalanche. I've bloodied my lip. I haven't been completely buried yet. But the point I'm getting to in this photo, I'm not thinking about work. And so if you can find things, I'm an adrenaline junkie, but just find things that completely consume your mental capacity for a moment, and that will really help you. That'll, I don't know if that's the exact question you're asking, Harpreet, but I think that your question was back on inspiration. I'm thinking about like surviving. How do you survive the grind without slowing down and just getting depressed?
Yeah, now I'm a huge fan of you know, afternoon walks. I do those myself, and just stepping away from the problem when you're stuck, just to get some space between you and the thing, to let it kind of marinate in the back of your mind. Because I think you're still thinking about it in the far fringes of your subconscious, even though it's not
Mm,
at the forefront of conscious thought, and that's what helps you kind of
yeah.
tackle it when you get back to it. So guys, keep the questions coming. By the way, screenshot us right now, tag Ben, tag me, hashtag DSGO virtual, and let people know that we're doing the AMA for the next at least half an hour. So keep them coming, guys. If you could lip sync one song, what would it be?
It would be Bonnie Tyler's "I Need a Hero." Is that the name of the song?
I need a hero.
Yeah,
All right.
because that's what I love when you run into AI projects or problems where you can kind of start singing Bonnie Tyler in your head. You're just like, time to save the world. There was so much activity during COVID, right? Where COVID, in a big way, COVID was a data problem. What is this disease? How is it spreading? What's the R naught? How do we treat it? What is the patient level data showing? There's been a lot of innovation in how do you even treat COVID? What are the correct ways to treat it? And um, yeah, so I need a hero. What are the hero projects you should be working on? So many in healthcare, but there's also a lot in safety and just general usefulness. One thing I'm totally geeking out on right now is if you look at the last 10 years of innovation in AI, anyone that works in the space, like Harpreet, I think you and I would definitely say we were surprised, right? Like a lot of really cool things happened in the last 10 years. Like
Mhm.
the AI community is constantly surprised on the fantastic innovation and the ability of these neural networks to keep leveling up. I think the next 10 years will make the last 10 years feel relatively slow. And so I'm incredibly excited about what does that mean? So what does that mean in the next 10 years if our innovation is accelerating? How is that going to change our lives? What types of things? I'm kind of being hypocritical right now because I'm saying what types of things could we look forward to? I'm saying that in a very obsessive way where I want to build those things. Like I want those things need to exist. I don't have to build them, but someone needs to build them because the value is obvious.
I'm especially a fan of like fascinated, especially fascinated by the generative type of networks and the ability for machine learning to create art in a sense. I'm wondering,
Yeah.
since we're talking about songs, like, do you think this would be something worth trying? Is maybe taking a bunch of your favorite songs and I don't know, feeding that to some generative algorithm to just create some new music that you might like. Does
Oh,
that
I
sound
no,
crazy?
I
Or
no, I think that's fascinating. I think the idea we're probably a long ways off from just like a pure GAN pumping out music that is capable of winning an award. But I think a few things you could probably do right away, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if people are already doing this with some very simple music where they're generating like a piano music or generating something that doesn't have audio where a human is speaking or trying to say something that's useful. But I think you could break it down. I think you could kind of digest it down and do something that I think would be really innovative. And maybe to geek out on that for a second more, Harpreet, is imagine a scenario if music was auto generated and it did so with feedback from you, like from an EEG cradle cap or like your energy level, right? So like maybe in the morning it's more your max cognitive load, you're a little bit more upbeat, you want something to kind of wake you up, and then in the afternoon you've got you can imagine music playing throughout the day where the AI system is trying to adjust and react to what you need in the moment. I think of the AI systems in the future as being kind of these obsessive pets, where if I have an AI system that's designed to weed my yard, its mission in its synthetic life is to make me happy. It's to go weed as many dandelions, and when it's not weeding dandelions, it's monitoring for pests and bugs and things that I don't like, and then it just like we have excess creative cycles in our brains. I want AI systems in the future to have excess creativity where they are analyzing the data, trying to understand it, and they really want that novelty reward. They want to come to me and say, "Hey, I found something interesting. I think you would like it," and those interactions will increase. That might seem a little creepy
mm,
and weird, but I think for applications like for search and rescue or the Mars rovers, you really want to get to these systems that kind of interact on their own, or they run missions on their own. They don't need daily check-ins with us, but they're also not conscious. They're not sentient. They're just they have
some,
curiosity,
yeah,
novelty, right?
they're just maximizing some type of function, right? So, like, what would the function for creativity look like, right? Is that how we would develop that type of system? The objective function would be some formula for creativity? What would that formula
Yeah.
look like?
So so with neural networks, with deep learning, you can think of them as encoders. Someone else said this, I forgot who, is unstructured data is data that's waiting to be structured. And I really like that.
Mm,
Because if you're talking about an exotic data type like video or audio or images or bringing it all together, really you're just encoding it into a vector. And if you're encoding this into a vector, it's really easy to do comparisons. So doing like Euclidean distance comparisons. And so the novelty is easy. So if I have a Mars rover that's out there looking at rocks all day, it's not very hard for me to have an AI system that is able to identify unique rocks, right? Like, oh, I haven't seen this rock before. This is a little weird. This is a little different. Just looking at encoding comparisons and doing some unsupervised clustering on that, I don't need a human to come up with a novelty library of all
mm,
the interesting things. And then with that novelty library, you can then imagine some assessments. Like, I found new rock doing X-ray analysis. Like I'm actually going to do some cost procedures, right? Because I predict that the probability of novelty is high. I found something novel first place. I'm now investing research without the human to get to the bottom of this. And now I found something interesting based on some mission requirements, and now I will escalate that all the way back. Yeah, so I think building AI machines to demonstrate curiosity and novelty seeking is very doable, but it doesn't mean they're alive. It doesn't mean It's a fun topic because you can imagine these systems acting alive, right? Like if I have a little dust cleaner that's really curious and going off in the corner of a theater and studying new things it hasn't seen, a human might look at that and say, "Oh my gosh, like that is really creepy. It's showing curiosity and novelty seeking." Where you and I would say, actually, it's trying to understand different types of messes and it's searching for new novel categories. It just wants to understand its environment because if the off chance it runs into this in the future, it wants to know what it is, right? So
Mm.
like a wall plate. A wall plate is hit off of the side. This little dust cleaning robot, it knows where the wall. It's like, oh, I've seen this before over here on the wall. But to find it, it had to have that novelty seeking behavior because when it came from the factory, it didn't know what a wall plate was. And now that it found it, it wants to be rewarded by the human because it doesn't want. It's going to take that wall plate to you to the janitor and say, "Look what I found. I think it. I think you need to fix it." And the janitor would say, "Thank you. You know, good robot. Pat you on the head. Give you whatever robots need. Right? What's the robot version of cocaine?" Um, I guess it really is their mission. The funny thing when you think of robots and computer incentive functions, they're off the charts. Like it literally is. It exceeds our ability to breathe. That's essentially the mission. Like the robot is it that is its whole purpose in life. Like it's using all possible resources to maximize that mission. And I think that's the thing people get worried about. Like, could a human get in the way of the mission,
Hmm.
or could the robot alter its mission?
That was very, very interesting and insightful. Speaking of uh, getting selfish here, I was getting selfish with my own questions. Let's go back to the questions coming in from the audience. You have a history of being a TV show extra. What TV show would you want to be an extra on?
Mm. Maybe Jackass. No, let's see. I would want to be an extra. I love all the Red Bull media series. Like I'm huge in that stuff. It doesn't mean I'm good. Like I would just love to be involved with any type of shot like that. Actually, we do have some epic video projects that we're working on right now. We've got one in the works where we're going to go backpacking and bring in a video crew and go fly fishing and that's related to AI, which is funny. Got another project potentially down in the desert where we're gonna have some off-road vehicles. Like we have other things in the works. There's always projects that are showing up. Um, so I guess the short answer to that question is I'd love to be an extra in my own video content where I'm working with our brilliant video team to do something epic.
Are you hiring? Because I'd love to get in on some of this action. That's very interesting. Somebody has a question here. What's the weirdest question you've been asked?
Weirdest question that I've been asked. Oh, that's a hard question. I'm surprised that's a hard question. Most questions are pretty tame. It'd be nice if someone just asked a question that was way out there, like, wow, way to get personal. Most questions are around how to get a job, data science, um, future of healthcare. So I don't have a good answer to that one. Going forward, I will try to keep track of the weirdest question that I've been asked.
Somebody wants to know what are some resources you use for keeping up to date with what's happening in AI? Are there any blogs you'd recommend? Any YouTubers? Anything like that that you'd recommend?
I think we have resources internally. I think a lot of companies have that where you can learn from people out in the field. You know, they're constantly posting papers in Slack. So I think you need to have different feeds. So you should curate your social feed to whether that's LinkedIn or Twitter or something else to feed you. So follow. There's so many great people to follow out there that are really innovative thought leaders. Kiparthi, I think that's his username. So he runs AI for Tesla. He was he was at Stanford. Yeah, so curate your social feeds to produce the content you need. There's obviously books that you can work through. Most of the projects I find myself working on, I'm hitting my head against new problems that aren't well documented. So for one of my projects right now, for that fitness coach one, um, this is an example where perfection is the enemy of good. So if I can get access to something that's more exotic, I want it. And so with that project, I've got GoPro Hero 9s that are being treated like webcams, and they're streaming the video feed, and I'm able to stream HDR10. And so instead of the 8-bit per pixel, I'm now getting 16-bit per pixel, which means instead of 255 unique values, I'm getting close to 65,000 unique values that can come in. And so most of my time is spent kind of dealing with like new interesting sensors, or I played around with the Azure depth camera. Has this 6 microphone array. So yeah, so it's not really a good resource because you're just hitting your head against the wall to figure out something new, and you're trying to find any whispers of GitHubs or projects that can help you. And sometimes they disappoint because other people, the Xbox project I was working on, no one was working on it. And so it was just months and months of hitting my head against the wall on how to make the gimmicks adapter play Call of Duty.
Huh. And I haven't seen that project. Is that available anywhere for us to read about or look at?
I think there's some YouTube clips somewhere. That was actually an old DSGO talk. So I had
Okay.
reinforced learning, and I had a model on the Xbox where it was learning to kill Call of Duty on Call of Duty. I never got superhuman. I definitely got so I could autonomously kill some people.
Yeah.
And that project, getting back to selfishness, very selfish project. It wasn't, I think this will be useful. I think the world needs to see this. It's like, no, I suck at Call of Duty. Me personally, I get destroyed by all these like 10-year-old kids online.
Mm.
And I want to eat popcorn and have an AI system play. Like that sounds entertaining for me.
It's an interesting question coming up here. Data science is changing every day. How do you keep up with things? How can you learn the unlearn part?
Um, So always have a passion project that you're working on. That'll be a good excuse for you to stay up to date, because you'll have to, as long as you have new projects that you're working on, that can help. One of the things that is exciting and maybe less overwhelming, because as new students, I get it. I get people are totally slammed. They're overwhelmed. They're like, how on earth can I know all of this stuff? It's too much. And I would argue you don't have to know all this stuff. Like, there's a small fraction of useful stuff. A lot of people don't need to apply deep learning at work, or they don't need to apply these things. There are tools out there that make it quite easy. So there are AI projects you can do today with minimal programming to no programming. And so the thing I want to share with the community is, if you wait long enough, your mom can do it. And
Mhm.
like, and what I mean by that is not to kind of beat that drum too much of like the gray haired and the white haired data scientists, the men and women that have been in this the longest. Things used to be really, really hard. And now with Kubernetes, Docker, AutoML, serverless, it's like the Twitter clone. Like we were celebrating the Twitter clone in 5 minutes, like from front end dev 10 years ago. Like that is what data science is becoming. So what should you learn next? I would, as long as you're hunting for value, how you do things, how you build things, the next version of deep learning that comes out, I would say that's a distraction. Unless you are like a deep AI researcher, just download the new network architecture. You don't need like, you only need to be building custom architectures if you're running into brand new problems. Otherwise, if you're hunting for value, you'll have a really exciting career. You'll have lots of opportunities, and with value comes funding, scaling, and the ability to take bigger risks. So I want to get too caught up on the next innovation, the next NLP model, the next deep learning, the next AutoML model. It's just a new line of code, and once it gets traction, you'll find out about it.
So, the question on that is it sounds to me like the focus should be just on kind of making sure you got the foundations and basics right before you start venturing off into the unknown. Just make sure there's a handful of things that you know really well. What would those handful of things be?
Yeah.
If that's what I'm
So
that's right. Yeah.
people might disagree with this, but I think it's nice to try to be more of a generalist if you're trying to get a job. So I've interviewed people before. There was someone we passed on once where they had no SQL experience. And I know you'd back me up on this one, Harpreet, that if you're really serious about data science
Yeah.
and having some SQL, like, I guess you have a session. Have you given your
Yeah,
assessment?
it's tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so you have a session on SQL that if you, it's known that you will have Swiss hole, like your foundation of data science is always going to be Swiss cheese. You're going to have holes in it. But if one of those holes is SQL, et cetera, like you have some foundational pillars. And so I think having breadth over depth is good. Um, Depth will naturally show up on a passion project. And that's why I'm a huge champion of passion projects. Like find find a passion project for you. I don't like fantasy football, but if you did a passion project on fantasy football, I would respect that. I would celebrate it. Like don't do projects that you think someone will like. Do projects
Mhm.
that are, I'm going to wake up early on Saturday before the family wakes up. I'm going to crank on this because it's so cool.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the Alan Watts quote: "Do things that are delightful to you, you'll thereby become delightful to others." Uh,
I like that.
yeah. Question
Well,
here. Yeah, sorry, go for it.
I was going to say, like, getting back to selfish projects, if you're selfishly interested, someone else is. If you're doing an AI project on fashion because you find it selfishly interesting, you're going to have a whole community of people that find that selfishly interesting too. So just like Hannah Fry, her projects are big hits. Yeah. So if they delight you, they will delight other people. I love what you said. So yeah.
Question here about your opinion on the hashtag open to work on the profile picture of LinkedIn. You know how they kind of have that green open to work thing. What's your thoughts
Oh
on that?
man, I kind of kicked the hornet's nest. I think 6 months ago on that,
Mm.
where I said it was bad, and people, oh my gosh, like some people said that I was a sexist, I was racist, I was a bigot. Like just saying that, I just said don't put open to work on your profile, even if you're looking for a job, don't do it because people have bias, they have unconscious bias, and some of the comments were so angry that I'd say that. But you know what was woven into those comments? They were recruiters saying totally, absolutely, yep, I do that, and I think it's really good for us to talk about unconscious bias, like what someone's recruiting. Do they want to hire someone who is in a job or who is out of work for 6 months or a year? And it's really sad because they're obviously good, really good people get fired. So if there are people listening, if you've been fired, if you lost your job, it has no sprinkle of merit on who you are. Like there are brilliant people that get fired every day. Sometimes if you go a long period without getting a job, that can be very discouraging. And so I see this momentum thing where, like, if you get multiple interviews coming together with multiple offers, you're going to be a badass. You're going to have so much confidence going in the interview process. But if you have self-doubt and you're not getting these offers when you think you should, that can come through in the interview process. And so unfortunately, open to work is one of those things where you're advertising that you are out of a job and you haven't been able to land a job. um, I'm just one opinion, but I noticed in that post I did, other recruiters and people were jumping on. Um, you know, I hired someone. They were starting in August, and we stole them from another employer. Um, they weren't open to work, and I think the bias is definitely there. That um, it doesn't mean that that's a deal killer, but I just think it's important to say that there's a distribution of opinions, and you need to respect that one of those opinions is one that you don't like,
Mm-hmm.
and be aware of it.
Question here about snowboards. What brand of snowboard do you use, and who is your favorite snowboarder?
Um, this will date me. I think my favorite snowboarder growing up was Peter Line, and
Mm.
people they probably like, who the hell is Peter Line? He at the time he would just go bigger than everyone else. He was absolutely insane. So I had all these Trans World Snowboarding like pages ripped out on my wall, scotch taped up of Peter Line. Um, so the snowboard I have, is it a Burton? I have so many snowboards. I think I have 5 snowboards. I've got like my park board, which is my GNU banana reverse camber one. Then I've got 2 split boards, and I've got a few like rock boards. You can never have too many snowboards, right?
That's awesome, man. What's your biggest pain point in your current role as an evangelist for an industry leading modeling tool?
Yeah, that I really appreciate this question. So, in full transparency, the biggest issue is artists are artists are messy, and what I mean by that is they struggle to follow process. But you really need both. You need to have really good evangelism, where you can have a lot of creativity. You can be good storytellers. If you hire the right people, that's actually pretty easy. The hard part is coming up with process and tracking, because you need attribution. So Salesforce flags, call to action. That excuse me. That's the hard part, but it's also the part that's the most exciting, because if you have really good attribution tracking, I think that's a miss in marketing generally. Is some people tease marketing and they like to say that it's like the BS department, and this is definitely not our marketing department. I like how it's run right now, but some marketing departments, I might come to you and say, "Oh, we did really well in marketing this quarter. We had 5 million impressions." And was that good? Like, how does 5 million impressions help the business? And so there's this attention funnel into sales, and the more you can get true attribution to say, I put $1 in, I got 2 out. I put $1 in, I got 5 out. I got 10 out. The the better off everything is, because then you can respond to actionable insight. Because if you don't have the data and if you don't have the insights in marketing, then you don't know where you're bleeding. And I would say you are always bleeding somewhere in your marketing department.
Definitely gonna have to talk to you offline about that at some point in the very near future. Get some thoughts around that and questions. Let's take some more from the audience, though. Earlier, we were talking a little bit about GitHub Copilot. So somebody wants to know, what are your thoughts on that, on GitHub Copilot?
Oh, maybe you can help me out here, Harpreet. Is that where it automatically generates code?
Yeah, the VS
Yeah.
Code extension. Yeah.
No, I think it's great. I love how hypocritical I'm being on this, because now I'm going to say I'm going to predict the future. So one of the things I'm really excited about in the next 10 years is this is fantastic code generation. Like, if you need to let's think of a really dumb piece of code. Like, let's say you have got a bunch of pickle files and you want to load them and do some standard action. You want to generate some reporting or something. Like, you can imagine, why are you writing that code? Like, that code should just be this natural request from the computer. And so the transition I see is the functions that are being written now are relatively simple, but that's the exciting part, because what is being offloaded, well, you're essentially the most junior part of you is being automated, it's being augmented. And eventually that will evolve where I think everyone listening, you will feel like you have a junior data scientist working for you. So there might be a future 5 or 10 years from now where I say, oh, this is super interesting. And now you talk to your computer and you say, hey, I'm getting ready to go to bed. Could you scrape this database globally and do all the clustering, unsupervised clustering, and pretty blah, 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 blah. Like I just threw out a data set request that doesn't exist. And then I came up with all these actions that I need. And now I'm going to go to bed. And I want an AI system that can do that. An AI system that will automatically begin scraping some data. And if it can't scrape the data, it will actually farm those jobs out to humans without me. Humans that can manually help out where it's stuck. Because the computer should do most of it, but when the computer's stuck, it can go out to other resources to figure it out. And now I wake up in the morning, I come downstairs, I pour my coffee, I'm half awake, and I talk to my kitchen. I say, how did it go last night? And then my home says, oh, really good news, and then fills in some name. Like, Harpreet, what is your name going to be called? So when AI is referring to you in your home, like Star Lord or what?
uh, I like the name Fox.
Fox.
Yeah.
So the my home will call me some name and say, well, we got pretty far along, and this will get back to efficiency of communication. So a lot of times as data scientists, we want to share our work. Like, oh, Ben, what are you working on? Well, I did A and it didn't work, and B and C and that didn't work, and then I did D. And that's a huge waste of time. No one wants to hear about your first 3 failures. They're not interesting. They're interesting to you because you spent weeks on them. They're not interesting to your boss. And so the AI system, it actually doesn't have to give me a play-by-play about how it sucked and it messed this up and I had to farm this out to humans. It just has to say, this is where we are. And now there's an opportunity for me to give some feedback and input, and then I can task it to go do other stuff. So I am so excited about the opportunity of interacting with a junior version of myself, or a junior data scientist, to just go do stuff while I'm sleeping. Like that's the ultimate dream. And then you interact with it, and those interactions will become fewer and fewer. But these systems are, again, are they are not conscious, they are not living, but they might show characteristics, traits, and behaviors, empathy, emotion detection. Like you could imitate Jarvis in a way that feels sentient and relatable, but it's just part of the it's part of the magic behind it.
This feeds in really nicely to the next question that we got here. So there's two questions that are that I want to kind of lump together as one question. They both are pertaining to fear. One question is, should we be afraid of AI? What could possibly go wrong? And the other question is, what are you afraid of? And what would you do if you didn't have that fear? So two kind of separate questions, but maybe we can blend them together.
Yeah, there's I love that's a great question. So the future's torn in half. You can look at the pessimist, the darkest possible outcome, or you can look at the optimist, the best possible outcome. So if I look at let's start negative and then we'll go to positive. So the darkest possible outcome is this essentially this uh, AI race with war machines, where these superpowers are fighting and dumping more and more money into drone swarms and autonomous AI and kinetic response and all these things that become unbelievably good at eliminating um, other people or other droids or drones. And you can imagine a scenario like that where I would say that you could have a dumb AI system that makes humans go extinct. So you can imagine aliens in the future visit Earth, and geez, these robots are so combatant. Combative. They're always fighting us, and it doesn't matter how much energy we send them in gift baskets. They continue to fight us, and that's because they're stupid. They're not writing books. They're not writing poems. They're just search and destroy. There is the concern about like the singularity, that a consciousness suddenly breaks out and is living, and there have been a lot of movies about that. So yes, like stuff like that could happen. It's not going to happen overnight. You will see it coming. And now let's look at the positivity. So I don't want people to think, oh, time to pull out all the computer plugs from the computers and go back to Stone Age. The upside is when it comes to healthcare, millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of people will be saved because of AI integration into healthcare with augmented intelligence being applied to healthcare, where every heartbeat in the ICU is being analyzed in real time at 500 hertz, 1,000 hertz to predict disease. If you or a loved one goes into the hospital, you don't have a doctor scratching their head trying to figure out if you are one in a million outcome. So, like, there are risks. AI can be used for harm. It's an amplifier. So, it can amplify humans to do good, amplify our curiosity or innovation, but it can also amplify humans to do bad. Um, Maybe a terrible visual to share is you can imagine in the future, maybe there's a drug bust next door and the police drones are knocking on the door. And now all the black market drones come out and there's a drone fight. The drug dealer has black market drones fighting the police drones. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, what a crazy world we live in. Hopefully, we don't go to that type of chaos, but there are dystopian movies that paint that picture. I have more faith in humanity that we can fix things and figure things out in a way that's useful.
I like this next question. Do you think AI is having an effect on how today's kids learn as compared to our generation? I don't know what generation this person is, but I think you and I are both 1983 kids. So let's just call that our generation.
Yeah, I am a 1983 kid. Uh, so when I was a kid, it was the attitude of like, "Hey, mom, I'm going to the rock quarry. I'll be home later tonight, or like maybe tomorrow." Like, it just felt like it's amazing that kids survived it all. Where now there's more helicopter parenting. We're so worried about what our kids are doing. Can we surveillance them with their phones? You know, could I have a drone walk my kid to school? So there. So we have different risk tolerances, I think, than I was raised with, especially when it comes to physical harm. It Everything you do has an impact on your child's development, which hopefully this doesn't like this is just true with psychology because we are products of our genetics and our experience. And so if I yell at my kids more than hug them, that will have a negative impact on them. But the same is true of AI. If I bring in AI systems like the one I'm building to turn off the TV when the room is messy, That's selfishly interesting to me. But that is a Black Mirror thread. You might say, I don't think AI should be delivering consequences to our kids, even if they're funny. That has an impact on their development. It does have an impact on their development. But for me personally, I don't think it's a big deal. But maybe for society, we might want to think twice before we're shipping AI parenting kits out to the masses at scale, because you'd really want to understand what is the negative impact if the parent is no longer the discipliner. Does that make sense? Where like AI will definitely have an impact, how much time we spend on screens, augmented reality. Um, Addiction is a real thing. So that dopamine hit people get from TikTok or these different things, just like sugar, like humans have a hard time controlling their sugar intake. They'll have a hard time controlling their kind of their social addictions as well. And so, suicide rates in teenagers and other things, it's definitely things we should be looking at and reviewing and trying to understand with technology.
Another question here is, what's your favorite alcohol?
Mm. Oh, that's a hard question. I do like things that are really fancy, so I'm more of like a pinkies up guy. So
Cocktails type of thing?
yeah, I had one in Boston. It's called Monkey Business, and I feel bad because I can't remember the restaurant, but it's like banana. I'm all about novelty.
Mm.
So we're all creatures of habits, where you might get your old fashioned or your standard wine. I will always risk a bad experience over chasing novelty. So anytime I go to a new bar or place, I'll ask, surprise me, or what are you guys known for? I'm always fighting for. I do like kind of a sipping tequila. I think that, but just like but they tend to be quite expensive, like an extra añejo sipping tequila. But it's so funny because alcohol kind of defines people, right? You're like, what do you like to drink? And what you say actually begins to share so much about who you are. Do you like?
For
Yeah.
me, it's craft beer. Like I like a really
Okay.
good craft beer. What does that say? What does that say?
I think that means you're pretty chill,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
espresso martini. What does that say about me?
Do you like to get jazzed in both ways, man? I guess y- let's do uh let's do another question here. Let's see. There's some good ones here. Let's go for let's go for this question about balance. How do you balance the pursuit of novelty versus learning to reliably implement things in production?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, how do you balance the pursuit of novelty and actually momentum, like learning momentum?
Yeah.
So for my novelty projects, they actually go into categories. So I might have all these different projects, but they're all doing a on the edge, some version of video, audio, deep learning. So I do try to group things, so that way a success on project A will actually help me for B and C. If they're too divided, I think this is a great question. Like if you are going in three different directions on three different projects, you're going to kind of suck at all three. But as long as they're kind of going in the same beachhead, I will suck at the first one, suck less at the second, and then be pretty decent at the third, right? So you want that momentum, so try to group them in your current interests. Man, it's not hard to come up with 5 or 10 projects that blow people's minds with creativity, and they're all under the same umbrella, right? Like you can get awesome projects in the same
Mhm.
umbrella in any moment.
Guys, make sure you screen cap this right now. Ben Taylor, Harpreet Sahota, tag us both on LinkedIn, hashtag DSGO Virtual. Let us know what your favorite part of this session was. I'm going to be going through all those notifications and reading them. And I noticed that yes, you right there, I see you. You have not yet done this. So go ahead and do that. Ben, how can people connect with you? Where can they find your podcast? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Ben Taylor Data on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I've got this Volley QR code up right now. You can do video chats with me there asynchronously. And then the podcast is called The More Intelligent Tomorrow. So if you Google The More Intelligent Tomorrow, add Data Robot to that, it'll be easy for you to find the podcast. And it's definitely, we've fought really hard to make it a gift for the community. So the questions in there, the way we pursue things, it does not feel like a corporate podcast. So definitely give it a listen.
Yeah, definitely. So, great show. You guys got episode with Hannah Fry, which is freaking phenomenal. So definitely go check it out. Ben, thanks so much for hanging out, man. It's good to see you as usual.
Yeah, great hosting. Always good to chat.
Thanks, man.